So this is just an update on the greenhouse. The plums are blooming. The front bed is all growing. We've got corn salad and arugula and some radishes all planted in there. It's all come up. The center bed, which is the transplanted from the garden, are just doing amazing. The kale has all put on so much growth. I've had to harvest a ton of it this week just to keep it from becoming a jungle in here and not waste it, obviously, the point of transplanting it. So let's show you what it looks like outside. This is what it looks inside. But yes, it's still very snowy outside. It's very nice to be in here, and we have no heat at all, just the fans from the geothermal going right now. The paths, I want to talk a little bit about how I control humidity and moisture in here. I've got a meter down here, and I'm always keeping an eye on that, what the humidity is. So when we put in a wood stove, one of the reasons we put in a wood stove is because it's really good for dropping the humidity in a greenhouse. If it gets too humid, you can, even if it's warm enough in the greenhouse, you can fire at the wood heat and dry things out, open up the vent windows even when it's very cold outside. If you have too much humidity, you can do that if you have a wood stove. The other thing we've got here is it may look like this is all one level, but in actual fact, all three of these beds are raised beds, about a foot up. And what I did is I dug the pathway quite wide and heaped that up on either side, and then I filled that with a foot of basically slow composting material. So the bottom has not too fresh manure, about 6 inches, and then there's about 6 inches of chipped wood on top. And this has multiple purposes. It's not producing a lot of heat because it's not deep enough to be really heavy composting, but what it is doing is providing some moisture control. So above the paths, there's actually little holes in between the two layers of plastic to allow drainage. And you can see there's a little bit of water builds up there. So what happens is when it gets too much water, the hole opens up there and it drips onto these paths and absorbs some of that moisture instead of going into the soil. It's into an absorbent material, basically your chips. And when it is the humidity does drop in here sometimes too low, especially when I have the wood heat on. What I do is I water this whole path. So it's a, well, think about it as a racing oval all the way around the greenhouse. Just 2 feet, like a foot deep, and about 2 feet wide. And that will absorb an amazing amount of moisture. And then in my permaculture sort of bed over here, where I've got fruit trees and everything, which is all budding right now, which is amazing. And in the front I've got bulbs. I don't know if you can see. Those are daffodils that are all coming up. There's about 6 inches of mulch on top of that. 3 or 4 inches in some areas and up to 6 inches in others. And that helps keep the moisture in the actual ground, which is amazing, and helps control humidity. So it's not evaporating into the greenhouse itself, it's staying in the ground. Reduces how much I have to water, but it also makes a big difference in it not becoming too humid in here. The other thing is having these 2 layers of plastic. A lot of the humidity actually forms, condenses in between the 2 layers. So inside the greenhouse is not too humid. It goes up there on the colder outside layer, condenses, and then drains away. I've got a barrel on the end there, and so again, I use that for humidity control. When the humidity is too low, I take the lid off the barrel and allow more evaporation. And then if it's still too low, as I said, I get out the watering can and I water all of the paths to absorb more moisture, and that brings up the humidity nice and gently. So it's not extremely fast. and it's done a really good job this year.